The question now is that the amendment be agreed to. I call the member for Hughes.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. I'm pleased to rise to speak on the Treasury Laws Amendment 2017 Enterprise Incentives No. 1 Bill. Deputy Speaker, a little over 75 years ago, in fact the 22nd of May, Sir Robert Menzies gave his famous The Forgotten People speech. And we need to put that speech and the messages in that into some context. Because only earlier in February that year that Singapore had fallen. Darwin had been attacked. The speech was given 2 weeks after the indecisive battle of the Coral Sea. At the time the speech was given, the Japanese were planning an attack on Sydney Harbour. That's the historical background that these magnificent words of the Forgotten People speech were made. And Sir Robert Menzies finished with the words, and I see the member for Charlton is sitting at the table, and I hope that he listens, and I hope that he actually might learn something from these words. What Sir Robert Menzies said, and I quote, to finish his speech, he said, "Individual enterprise must drive us forward." And he concluded with the last paragraph. "What really happens to us will depend on how many people we have who are of the great and sober and middle class, the strivers, the planners, the ambitious ones. We destroy them at our peril." That's a warning, Deputy Speaker, that we all must be constantly aware of. And yet, sadly, Deputy Speaker, we've seen currently in this Parliament one side of the House determined to make it harder and harder for those strivers and planners, those that are prepared to take the risk, those that will drive our economy forward. Everything that the Labor Party does, Deputy Speaker, is to drive those people out of business, to destroy them. What they don't understand, Deputy Speaker, is the importance of incentives in the economy. And there's 3 main factors, Deputy Speaker, that we are really in danger of. The first, Deputy Speaker, is our nation's corporate tax rate. We simply have to have an internationally corporate tax rate. We've had that in the past, Deputy Speaker, and wise leaders, like Peter Costello, he understood that, and he reduced Australia's corporate tax rate from 36% down to 30%, Deputy Speaker, back in the year 2000. Previous to that, even Paul Keating understood the importance of having an internationally competitive tax rate. And as other members have noticed, previously Labor members understood and agree with that proposition. But we face an international environment today, Deputy Speaker, where our major competitors have understood this and have lowered their corporate rate of tax. We see the UK, Deputy Speaker, with plans to lower their corporate tax rate to 20% and take it down further, because they understand if you lower that corporate rate of tax, you attract investment, you end up with more jobs, and at the end of the day, you end up with more government revenue. Exactly the same in the USA. They've realised, Deputy Speaker, that President Trump has promised to reduce their corporate tax rate in the US to 15%. We've seen our cousins, our Kiwi cousins over the ditch, reduce their corporate tax rate to 28.5%. And the New Zealand example is interesting to learn from, because they lowered their corporate rate of tax, and guess what actually happened to taxation revenue? It wasn't a giveaway to big business, as members of the opposition like to always say. At the lower rate of tax, New Zealand actually got more government revenue. And Deputy Speaker, we don't have to look as far as New Zealand. We only have to look at our own history. And we see that every single time from Paul Keating's days when he lowered the corporate rate of tax to increase our international competitiveness, to when Peter Costello did, at the end of the day, we got more revenue flowing into the government. We grew the size of the economic pie. We created more jobs. We created more wealth. We created more prosperity. And as government, we had more revenue flowing in to pay for all the things, all the social service programs, Deputy Speaker, that all of us so desperately want to provide. But yet, knowing the importance, knowing the history, we still have the Labor Party trying to block reductions in the corporate rate of tax for business. I would like to ask members of the Labor Party, how do they think our nation is going to compete in the years ahead if we are stuck with a 30% rate of corporate tax and the US is at 15%? What damage will that do to our economy? Second, Deputy Speaker, the second important incentive that we must have is we must look at the rates of the highest rates of the personal marginal rate of tax. Now, Deputy Speaker, if the Labor Party had their way, they want to set the highest rate of personal marginal tax in this nation at 49.5%, effectively 50%. So what that would mean, when someone reached 180,000, should they decide that they want to take a bit more of a risk, or if they want to work a bit longer hours, or if they want to try a new business idea, whatever income that they earn, the government will take half. And the half that they are left with, if they go and spend it, another 10% will come out in GST. That becomes a disincentive for those strivers, those planners, those ambitious ones that Sir Robert Menzies advises that we must always fight to protect. There's also the issue, Deputy Speaker, of the international competitiveness of our highest personal rate of marginal tax. If someone can go to Singapore, Deputy Speaker, if one of those bright, young, ambitious Australians that we have countless of them, if they can go to Singapore and pay a personal rate of tax of around 15 or 17%, and yet in Australia it's effectively 50, which is the Labor part, how many great young Australians will take the opportunity and move overseas? And the third area, Deputy Speaker, that threatens to undermine those strivers, those planners, those ambitious ones, is the cost of energy in this nation. It used to be our nation's competitive advantage. We had the coal-fired power plant right next to the coalfields, close to the transmission grid, close to the city. So we in Australia could generate electricity cheaper than anywhere else in the world. And that underwrote thousands and thousands of jobs. Thousands of jobs in our aluminium industry, Deputy Speaker, and countless other industries. That was our nation's competitive advantage. And like in life, if you get a competitive advantage, you guard the thing with your life. If you are running a business or a corporation and you find you're able to develop a competitive advantage, you fight for it every single day to keep it and maintain it. And yet, we have seen members from the Labor Party prepared to surrender our nation's competitive advantage purely on an ideological basis. That they like the look of wind turbines. They think the wind turbines are wonderful. They may very well be, Deputy Speaker. Some people may like them, but they are undermining our nation's competitive advantage. They are destroying jobs today. They are white-anting our nation's economy. We've seen the evidence from South Australia. We've seen how the Labor South Australian government has almost destroyed their economy. I noticed the member from South Australia over there. He must apologise. He must see the pain that it's causing constituents in his electorate. He must see the pain that it's causing to industry. And yet, the highest unemployment in the nation, where does that belong? In South Australia. And yet, Deputy Speaker, what do the Labor Party want to do? They want to copy exactly Labor's 50% renewable energy target. You could not, Deputy Speaker, you could not think of a policy that could damage our nation's competitiveness. And Deputy Speaker, that's why this bill, in a very small way, is important. because it helps those strivers, those planners, those ambitious ones. We understand, and we want to give them every encouragement to go out into the marketplace and to risk their capital, to test their ideas in the marketplace, Deputy Speaker, because we know most of them eventually will fail. That's the reality. Most of them will eventually fail. But we need to give them the incentive to get out there and to give it a go and to try. Because if we fail to do so, Deputy Speaker, we will simply go backwards as a nation. Therefore, the measures in this bill. Firstly, Deputy Speaker, in Schedule 1, they increase the access to losses. This measure was announced as part of the government's National Innovation and Science Agenda. It will relax the same business tests for assessing prior year company losses to other financial years and introduce a similar business test. What we want to do, Deputy Speaker, is to be able to encourage businesses to go out and try new ideas. And if they try them, Deputy Speaker, and they incur a loss, which many of them will do when they are experimenting, we want to say, well, you can carry that loss forward under that same business if you are doing something similar in the same business. A very simple thing. And today's economy, Deputy Speaker, when innovation is moving so quickly, when we are seeing the needs of companies to be agile and mobile and to change track quickly, we need to have this to change it from the same business test to a similar business test. It may seem only a few words, but it's a very, very important amendment. Deputy Speaker, because what it does, it allows the operation of the same business test. It allows loss-making entities to seek out new capital and new opportunities to hopefully eventually return to profitability. The proposal has two elements. First, companies will be able to access...
It's been 7:30 p.m. I propose a question that the House to now adjourn